Paul recognizes that although most people are now preaching the gospel fearlessly, stimulated by Paul's imprisonment, not all of that has been motivated by goodwill. Some people are doing it out of envy and rivalry. Who are these people? The answers, well, we don't really know. Some people have suggested that these might be pagans, Gentiles, who are simply gossiping about Christ and the gospel in the light of Paul's arrest and slandering Paul through this. But the context seems to suggest actually we're talking about Christians here. And probably the most that we can say is that these people are Paul's opponents. They are against him for some reason, and therefore his arrest has sort of emboldened them maybe in sharing the gospel. Paul takes comfort that there are those who nonetheless recognize that he has been arrested and his situations are for the defense of the gospel. And this is both the reason for his arrest. Paul has been arrested because he has been defending the gospel, but also the purpose of his arrest. Has been arrested so he can defend the gospel, both in sharing it with the guards and also when he's taken before judges and rulers. And these people are the ones who preach out of goodwill and love. We lack sufficient information to be sure about what Paul means when he talks about people who preach out of selfish ambition and wish to stir up trouble for him while he is in chains. Perhaps the most convincing explanation I have come across is that these were people who were using Paul's arrest to claim that it was a sign that God had abandoned him and rejecting him, and using their preaching and perhaps the success of their preaching to suggest that God was on their side and no longer with Paul. But again, that's probably little more than speculation. Some are surprised and even puzzled at the change of tone that we have here, say, when compared with Galatians. In Galatians, we find a much more emotional Paul calling down curses upon those who dare to preach another gospel. Now, here his attitude seems to be quite relaxed. What does it matter? The main cause of the difference is what is at stake. When it is the gospel itself, when it is the truth of the gospel, then Paul will not yield an inch. He will be steadfast in his defense of the gospel. Where it's perhaps Paul himself and the attitude of people to him, he can be a bit more relaxed. In the end, as long as it is the gospel that is being preached, whether people are doing it because they love him or they're wanting to stir up jealousy and envy, that's not the most important thing. Paul rejoices because the gospel is being preached independent of his personal circumstances. And this perhaps provides us with the main lesson of how Paul was able to maintain his joy even when faced with the difficulties and sorrows of his own circumstances. He was able to keep his focus on Jesus and